My son sold my house for $1.5 million without my knowledge. I just said to him, "The countdown has begun. See you in 3 days." He laughed, confident of victory, but had no idea what awaited the new owners inside the house. When he found out the truth, the police were already there, and everything turned upside down. The real estate papers hit the kitchen table like accusations, scattering across the worn wooden surface I'd eaten breakfast on for 43 years. Seth's fist followed, making my coffee mug jump and spill dark liquid across the market analysis he'd apparently spent weeks preparing. "Dad, this house is dead capital. We can get $1.5 million. I set down the dish towel slowly, my wet hands finding the familiar groove in the counter, where Gail used to lean while watching me cook. The same counter Seth now loomed over, his face flushed with the kind of desperation I'd seen in his eyes since the divorce cleaned out his savings. "This house will never be sold. Never." He swept the papers into a neat pile, his movements sharp and calculated. Property comparisons, neighborhood assessments, tax records. My son had done his homework while I slept upstairs, believing we still shared the same definition of home. "Look at these numbers," he jabbed at a highlighted figure. "Split-level ranch in Brookline sold for 1.2 last month. Our Victorian is worth at least 300,000 more. We could buy 2 smaller places. You get your independence, I get mine." The word independence sat between us like a blade. At 42, Seth lived in his childhood bedroom because his ex-wife had taken half of everything, including his pride. "You're destroying my future with your sentiments." I touched the family photo on the windowsill. Gail, Seth, and me at his high school graduation, back when his eyes held warmth instead of calculations. "And you're destroying our family with your greed." Seth began pacing, his dress shoes clicking against the old floorboards that had witnessed birthday parties, Christmas mornings, and late-night conversations with his mother. Now they echoed with something colder. "This isn't greed, it's survival. Do you know what it's like being 42 and living with your father? Do you have any idea how that feels when I'm trying to rebuild my life? I know how it feels to lose the only woman I ever loved in this house. I know how it feels to see her garden from these windows every morning. This house isn't an investment, Seth. It's where your mother died, holding my hand." The pacing stopped. For a moment, something flickered in his expression. The boy who used to help Gail plant tulips every spring. Then his jaw tightened, and that boy disappeared again. "She's gone, Dad. The memories won't pay for your care when you need it, or help me start over. We're sitting on a fortune while you work yourself into an early grave doing electrical jobs at 68. He pulled out his phone, scrolling through real estate listings, with the mechanical precision that had made him successful in IT management. Before the marriage imploded, before he'd moved back home like a teenager, except now he wore expensive suits and spoke in profit margins. "I've already talked to 3 realtors. Peterson and Associates thinks we could get asking price within 2 weeks if we list next month. The market's hot, Dad. We're wasting time." My dish towel hit the counter with more force than intended. "You've talked to realtors? About my house? Without asking me?" "Our house. Legally, I'm still on the deed from when Mom was sick and you needed someone to help with paperwork, remember? You said you trusted me to handle family business." The trust I'd placed in him during Gail's final months now felt like a noose around my neck. I'd been so focused on her medical needs, I'd signed papers without reading the fine print. My engineering mind, usually so precise with details, had been clouded by grief and exhaustion. Seth gathered his papers, sliding them into a manila folder labeled Property Options. The clinical organization of it struck me as obscene. "I'm not asking anymore, Dad. I'm 42 years old, and I'm taking control of my life, with or without your blessing." I walked toward the kitchen doorway, my bare feet silent on the cold tiles. Behind me, Seth's voice continued, but I was already moving through the house where Gail's presence still lived in every room, where Seth's threats couldn't reach the memories that mattered more than money. The conversation wasn't over. It was just beginning. 2 in the morning found me staring at the ceiling, Seth's words replaying like a broken record. The house settled around me with familiar creaks and sighs, sounds that had lulled me to sleep for decades, but now felt like whispers of betrayal. I gave up on sleep and padded barefoot across the cold hardwood floors, navigating by memory through rooms I'd walked for 43 years. The darkness felt different now, heavier, filled with the weight of endings I wasn't ready to face. In the living room, my fingers found Gail's reading chair by touch. The fabric still held the faintest trace of her lavender soap, though she'd been gone 18 months. I sat where she used to curl up with her mystery novels, watching snow fall through these same windows while Seth played with building blocks at her feet. Back then, he'd been fascinated by how things fit together. I'd shown him basic electrical circuits, and he'd spend hours connecting batteries to tiny bulbs, eyes bright with discovery. When had that wonder transformed into this cold calculation of square footage and market value? The kitchen drew me like a magnet. I opened the cupboard where Gail's favorite coffee mug still sat, the blue ceramic one with World's Best Gardener that Seth had given her for Mother's Day when he was 12. She'd used it every morning until the cancer made coffee taste like metal. Her recipe box sat on the counter, cards yellowed with age and splattered with evidence of family dinners. Gail's careful handwriting filled each one. Seth's favorite chocolate chip cookies, use extra vanilla. Abner's birthday cake, don't forget the coffee frosting. I opened to a random card and found her note about Thanksgiving stuffing. This house isn't walls, Abner. It's our love mixed into everything we've built together. She'd written that during her final autumn, when she knew she wouldn't see another holiday but wanted to leave instructions for carrying on traditions. Through the window above the sink, moonlight illuminated her garden. The rose bushes we'd planted for our 20th anniversary stood like sentinels in the darkness. She'd chosen varieties that would bloom continuously from spring through fall, creating a living calendar of our marriage. Even now, tiny buds promised another season of beauty Seth couldn't calculate in his spreadsheets. I pulled her garden journal from the drawer, pages filled with planting dates, weather observations, and philosophical musings about growth and patience. Gardens teach us that beautiful things take time, she'd written. Just like raising children, just like building a marriage. You can't rush love. You can only tend it carefully and trust the process. Her jewelry box sat on our dresser upstairs, but I couldn't bring myself to climb those stairs. Instead, I found her gardening gloves on the mudroom shelf, still shaped to her small hands. The leather was cracked but supple, worn smooth by decades of tending what we'd planted together. Gail, what would you do? How did we reach this point where our son sees dollar signs instead of memories? But I knew the answer. Seth's transformation had begun long before tonight's argument. His marriage had failed partly because he'd thrown himself into work, chasing promotions and bonuses while his wife begged for time together. The same pattern now, viewing relationships as transactions, measuring success in numbers rather than connection. When Gail was dying, Seth had visited dutifully but briefly, uncomfortable with mess that couldn't be managed through an app or solved with more efficient systems. He'd hired professional caregivers and insisted on the best medical equipment, but he'd avoided the small intimacies, holding her hand, brushing her hair, reading aloud from her favorite books. Standing in our darkened kitchen, I understood something fundamental had broken in my son when his mother needed him most. He'd protected himself from grief by creating emotional distance, and now that distance had calcified into something harder, the inability to see value beyond profit margins. The house creaked again, and I imagined Gail's spirit moving through rooms where we'd celebrated Seth's first steps, nursed him through fevers, photographed him before school dances. This house had absorbed our family's joys and sorrows, becoming more than shelter. It was the physical embodiment of our shared history. Dawn was still hours away, but I felt something shifting inside me. Not resignation, something fiercer. A determination born from 43 years of building something precious that couldn't be reduced to real estate comparisons. Seth had made his position clear. Now it was time to make mine equally transparent. Morning light filtered through the kitchen windows as I loaded my car with methodical precision. 2 weeks' worth of clothing, my fishing gear, and 3 books I hoped might distract me from the tension that had settled like fog over our house. The lake cabin in New Hampshire had been calling to me for months. Now it felt less like vacation and more like strategic retreat. Seth's bedroom door remained closed as I carried my suitcase downstairs. Good. I wanted distance from last night's argument, space to think without his calculations polluting every conversation. The drive would give me time to sort through options that didn't involve betraying Gail's memory. My engineering mind appreciated the ritual of packing. Tackle box organized by lure type, clothes folded to maximize space, emergency kit secured in the trunk. These small acts of preparation felt like armor against the chaos Seth had introduced into my carefully ordered world. "Leaving early, aren't you?" Seth's voice from the kitchen doorway made me jump. He stood there in his pajamas and bathrobe, coffee mug in hand, studying my loaded car with the same calculating expression he'd used on those real estate documents. "Have a good vacation, Dad?" Something in his tone felt wrong, too casual, too dismissive, as if my absence was part of some larger equation he'd already solved. "Think about your words while I'm gone." He nodded, but his eyes held secrets I couldn't decode. "Drive safely. The weather's supposed to turn rainy by afternoon." I backed out of the driveway that had held my car for 43 years, watching Seth in the rearview mirror. He remained in the doorway until I turned the corner, his figure growing smaller, but somehow more ominous with distance. Route 2 stretched west through Massachusetts countryside, still touched with spring's tentative green. I'd driven this route countless times, first with Gail and baby Seth, later with just Gail, after Seth had grown too busy for family vacations. The familiar landmarks usually brought comfort: the antique barn in Harvard, the covered bridge in Templeton, the mountain views as the road climbed toward New Hampshire. Today they felt like checkpoints marking my retreat from a battle I hadn't known I was fighting. Seth's transformation troubled me more than his actual words. The boy who'd once helped his mother plant marigolds had become a man who saw flower beds as wasted square footage. Somewhere between his high school graduation photo and last night's argument, my son had lost the ability to value anything that couldn't be measured in profit and loss statements. Maybe I'd failed him somehow. Maybe focusing so intently on providing financial security had taught him to view relationships as investments rather than connections. Gail had always been the family's emotional center. Without her balancing influence, perhaps Seth had inherited only my analytical nature, without the warmth she'd wrapped around it. The New Hampshire border appeared sooner than expected, marked by the familiar "live free or die" sign that had always amused Gail. "Dramatic, don't you think?" she'd say each time we passed it. As if freedom were that simple. Freedom. Seth claimed to want independence, but what he really sought was escape from the weight of family history. He couldn't appreciate that some things were worth more than their market value because he'd never learned to see beyond immediate gratification. Lake Winnipesaukee appeared through the trees like an old friend, its surface mirror calm in the morning stillness. The lodge where I'd reserved a room for the week sat nestled among pine trees, its weathered shingles and wraparound porch promising the kind of peace that had become impossible at home. "Mr. Hezekiah, right on time." The desk clerk, a woman about my age with kind eyes, handed me keys to cabin 12. "Weather's perfect for fishing. Heard the bass are running early this year." I thanked her and walked toward my temporary sanctuary, feeling some of the tension leave my shoulders for the first time in weeks. Here, surrounded by water and trees unchanged since my childhood visits, maybe I could find perspective on Seth's ultimatum. But as I unpacked my suitcase in the cabin's pine-paneled bedroom, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was missing something crucial. Seth's tone that morning, his casual dismissal of my departure, it felt like a chess player watching his opponent walk into a carefully prepared trap. The lake stretched before my cabin windows, deceptively peaceful. I had a week to figure out how to save my marriage to memory from my son's marriage to money. I just hoped a week would be enough. The black BMW gleaming in my driveway stopped me cold. Where my old Ford usually sat, this luxury machine crouched like a predator marking new territory. I pulled my fishing gear from the rental car slowly, studying the sleek lines and dealer plates that screamed expensive impulse purchase. Seth appeared at the front door before I'd reached the porch steps, practically bouncing with excitement. His eyes held a manic brightness I'd never seen before, the look of a gambler who'd just hit the jackpot. "Dad, I have news. Good news." The house felt different the moment I stepped inside. Something in the air had shifted during my absence, though I couldn't identify what. Maybe it was Seth's energy crackling through familiar spaces, or the way shadows seemed to fall differently through windows I'd looked through for 43 years. "Let me get my bags upstairs first." I started toward the staircase, but Seth blocked my path with barely contained enthusiasm. "This can't wait." He thrust a manila folder at me, the same clinical organization from our kitchen argument a week ago. I solved our problem. My blood chilled before I understood why. "What did you do?" "I sold the house for $1.5 million. We're rich." The folder trembled in my hands as I opened it to find official documents bearing yesterday's date. Purchase agreement, transfer of ownership, settlement statement. My signature, except I'd never signed anything. My name written in handwriting that wasn't quite mine, close enough to pass casual inspection, but wrong in ways only I would notice. The buyers are a young tech couple from Cambridge. They offered full asking price, no inspection contingencies. Cash deal, Dad. Can you believe it? I negotiated above market value. Numbers swam before my eyes. $1,500,000. Settlement date, May 6th, 2025. Yesterday. While I'd been driving home from New Hampshire, strangers had legally purchased the house where I'd loved Gail, raised Seth, built a lifetime of memories. We? Do you have 3 days to find me new housing? Seth laughed, actually laughed as if my question were delightfully naive. Don't worry about logistics. I've already researched senior communities in the area. There's a lovely place in Lexington with golf and meal plans. You'll love the social activities. I sat down heavily in Gail's reading chair, the purchase agreement still open in my lap. Legal language blurred together. Property to be vacated by May 9th, 2025. 3 days. 43 years reduced to a weekend moving timeline. The new owners seem nice, Seth continued, pacing with predatory energy. Jennifer works at Google, Mark's with a biotech startup. They're excited about the original Victorian details. Apparently Jennifer grew up in a similar house in Vermont. Jennifer and Mark, names attached to faces I'd never seen. People who would sleep in the bedroom where Gail took her last breath, cook in the kitchen where we'd shared 40 years of morning coffee, tend the garden where she'd planted roses for our anniversaries. I bought the BMW as an investment vehicle, literally. Seth jangled keys like he was 12 years old again, showing off a new bicycle. German engineering, excellent resale value. Plus, I'm looking at condos in the Back Bay, young professionals, happening nightlife. Time to start living again, you know? The settlement statement showed Seth's signature on multiple lines. Legal owner, sole beneficiary. His name on the deed going back 3 years to when Gail was dying and I'd trusted him to help with paperwork. I was too grief-stricken to understand. I've got appointments with 3 realtors tomorrow to look at properties for myself. Market's moving fast. Got to strike while the iron's hot. You should see some of the places I'm considering. Floor-to-ceiling windows, granite countertops, smart home technology. Seth's voice faded to background noise as I studied documents that had dismantled my life with the efficiency of a surgical procedure. Every page bore official stamps, witness signatures, notary seals. Legal, binding, complete. The closing was incredibly smooth, he was saying. Lawyer said he'd rarely seen such a clean transaction. No complications, no delays. Jennifer and Mark are planning to move in Friday morning. They're having the whole place professionally cleaned tomorrow. Friday morning. Professional cleaners would erase the scent of Gail's lavender soap from her favorite chair, scrub away fingerprints she'd left on door frames, polish floors that still held the echo of her footsteps. By weekend, strangers would be creating new memories where ours had lived for nearly half a century. Seth stood at the window, admiring his BMW in the dying light. You know what the best part is? I negotiated a 30-day rent-back option if we needed it, but we won't. I've got everything planned out perfectly. Everything planned. While I'd been casting lines into peaceful New Hampshire waters, my son had been executing the destruction of everything his mother and I had built together. The precision of it struck me like a physical blow. This wasn't impulse or desperation. This was calculated betrayal, orchestrated during my absence with the cold efficiency of a hostile corporate takeover. Seth turned from the window, keys still dancing in his palm, completely oblivious to the devastation spreading through my chest like poison. 11 o'clock found Seth sound asleep, his satisfied snores drifting through the wall that separated his childhood bedroom from the master suite where Gail and I had shared 41 years of marriage. I lay staring at the ceiling, counting each breath like a meditation against the panic clawing at my chest. By midnight, I gave up pretending sleep would come. The house felt like a museum in the darkness, each familiar creak and settle now, carrying the weight of impending loss. I moved through rooms where shadows held 43 years of accumulated life, touching surfaces that would soon belong to Jennifer and Mark, the tech couple who'd bought my history for $1.5 million. In Seth's room, drawers full of old tax documents revealed the paper trail of my own destruction. There, in Gail's careful handwriting, transfer deed to Seth for estate planning purposes, April 2022. Her signature, trusting and innocent, believing she was protecting our family's future. The date struck me like lightning. April 2022, 3 months before she died. Seth had convinced his dying mother to sign away the house under the guise of tax planning, probably telling her it would make things easier for everyone after she was gone. Maybe he'd even believed it then. But the folder underneath told a different story. Real estate market analyses going back 18 months, property assessments, neighborhood sales comparisons, all in Seth's handwriting, all dated after Gail's funeral. He'd been planning this betrayal since before we'd finished grieving her loss. I found myself in Gail's sewing room, surrounded by half-finished projects she'd never complete. A quilt for the grandchildren Seth claimed he wanted someday. Squares of fabric arranged in the pattern she'd called wedding ring. Interlocking circles representing eternal love. The irony felt deliberate, as if the universe were mocking my naivety. Her jewelry box sat open on the dresser, costume pieces mostly, but each one tied to specific memories. The pearl earrings I'd given her for our 10th anniversary. The silver bracelet Seth had bought her for Mother's Day when he was 16 and working his first job at the hardware store. Back when he understood that some things carried value beyond their price tags. Inside the lid, a folded paper bore her handwriting. For Abner. This house isn't walls and windows, my love. It's every morning we've shared coffee in the kitchen. Every Christmas we've watched Seth open presents by the tree. Every quiet evening we've sat together on the porch swing. It's our love made visible, our family made permanent. Promise me you'll never let anyone reduce it to dollars and cents. The letter was dated 2 weeks before she died, when she still believed family meant something to the son she'd raised to value connection over profit. 3 in the morning brought the kind of clarity that only comes with complete emotional exhaustion. I sat in our kitchen, my kitchen for 3 more days, watching dawn approach through windows Gail had hung with curtains she'd sewn herself. The sunrise ritual we'd shared for decades, now counting down like a death sentence. Seth had used her trust to steal everything that mattered, timing his betrayal for maximum efficiency while I was away and unable to interfere. The week in New Hampshire hadn't been escape. It had been exile, carefully orchestrated to give him the space he needed to complete his transaction without emotional complications. But something else was crystallizing in the pre-dawn quiet. Seth's MBA training had taught him to identify opportunities and execute strategies, but his engineering education had come from watching his father solve complex problems with patience, precision, and an understanding that every system had weaknesses waiting to be exploited by someone who truly understood how things worked. My son had made one critical error in his calculations. He assumed that because I'd been caught off guard, I was powerless. He'd forgotten that the man who'd taught him to think analytically still possessed 45 years of professional experience in electrical systems, building codes, and the kind of technical knowledge that could turn a Victorian house into something far more complicated than a simple real estate transaction. The countdown Seth didn't know had started wasn't about days until possession transfer. It was about the time remaining before he understood exactly what kind of man he'd chosen to betray, and what that man was capable of when everything he loved had been taken away. Dawn broke over Gail's garden, illuminating roses that would bloom for Jennifer and Mark while my world ended on a Tuesday morning in May. 7:30 found me sitting at the kitchen table with cold coffee, watching Seth bounce down the stairs like a teenager anticipating his first date. He hummed some tune from his college years, pausing to check his reflection in the hallway mirror before breezing into the kitchen with infectious enthusiasm. Beautiful morning, isn't it? He poured coffee into the mug that had been his since high school, the one with MIT engineering and faded letters. I've got appointments with 2 real estate agents today. One's showing me a corner unit in the North End. The other's got a place near Faneuil Hall with harbor views. I watched him butter toast with the casual confidence of a man who'd solved all his problems through a single decisive action. The BMW key sat on the counter like a trophy, catching morning sunlight through windows that would soon frame someone else's breakfast routine. "Don't sulk, Dad. We'll find you a nice apartment." His tone carried the patronizing kindness of someone discussing arrangements for a family pet. I sipped my coffee, noting how he'd said, "We'll find you," rather than, "We'll find us." Already mentally relocated to his bachelor paradise while relegating me to some managed care facility with scheduled activities and monitored medication. "That Lexington place has a great dining room," he continued, scrolling through his phone while eating. "Social director organizes bridge tournaments, book clubs, movie nights. You'll make friends your own age instead of rattling around this big empty house talking to yourself." The casual cruelty of it struck me as almost artistic in its precision. Reduce my 43 years of marriage to rattling around and talking to myself, as if Gail's presence had been imagination rather than the foundation upon which I'd built everything meaningful in my life. Seth glanced at his Apple Watch, already calculating drive time to his first appointment. "Jennifer and Mark want to walk through tomorrow evening, get measurements for furniture. I told them that was fine. You'll probably want to start packing anyway." I set down my coffee cup with deliberate care, the sound echoing in kitchen silence that had always felt comfortable before today. "Well, Seth, the countdown has started." He paused mid-bite of toast, looking at me with the amused tolerance usually reserved for eccentric relatives making cryptic pronouncements at family gatherings. "What countdown? You're speaking in riddles." The morning light caught his expression perfectly, eyebrows raised in theatrical confusion, mouth curved in a smile that suggested he was humoring an old man's dramatic tendencies. He genuinely believed my words were empty theater, the powerless protests of someone who'd been outmaneuvered by superior strategic thinking. "You'll find out soon." Seth laughed, actually threw back his head, and laughed like I'd delivered the punchline to some elaborate joke. "Dad, you're 70 years old." 68. "Okay, 68. Point is, you're retired, living on Social Security and whatever you make doing odd electrical jobs. What exactly are you going to count down to? Filing a complaint with the Better Business Bureau?" He stood up, brushing crumbs from his expensive suit with the same casual dismissal he'd applied to every concern I'd raised since his return from New Hampshire. The BMW keys disappeared into his pocket with a satisfied jingle. "Look, I know this is hard. Change always is. But you raised me to be practical, to solve problems instead of wallowing in sentiment. That's exactly what I'm doing, solving the problem of two people trying to live in a house that's worth more than either of us will see in retirement income." Seth checked his reflection in the toaster's chrome surface, adjusting his tie with the same precision he'd once used to align electronic components in high school robotics club. Back when he'd understood that successful engineering required respect for every element in the system, especially the ones that seem powerless. "I'll call you tonight, let you know how the apartment visits go. Maybe we can grab dinner somewhere nice. My treat, obviously. Celebrate our new financial freedom." He headed toward the door, keys already out, mind clearly focused on corner units and harbor views, rather than the old man sitting in the kitchen of the house he'd just stolen. At the threshold, he paused for one final reassurance. "Don't worry about the countdown thing, Dad. Whatever you're planning, I'm sure it's harmless." The front door closed with a sound like a vault ceiling shut, followed by the BMW's engine purring to life in the driveway where my Ford had sat for 15 years. I remained at the kitchen table, listening to expensive German engineering carry my son toward his appointments, with a future that didn't include room for inconvenient emotional attachments. Seth's laughter still echoed in the morning air, and I found myself smiling for the first time since discovering the purchase agreement. He'd made another critical miscalculation, assuming that harmless meant powerless, that an old man's threats were as empty as his bank account. In 3 hours, he'd learned the difference between an electrical engineer who'd forgotten his training and one who'd simply been waiting for the right moment to apply it. The basement workshop hadn't seen this kind of activity in years. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead as I unrolled the original 1924 electrical blueprints across my workbench, their edges yellowed, but every line still crisp as the day the architect drafted them. 43 years of living in this house meant knowing every wire, every junction box, every circuit breaker like anatomy. My old multimeter from General Electric days still worked perfectly, its analog needles swinging with reassuring precision as I tested voltage readings throughout the house. The basement electrical panel told stories Seth had never bothered to learn, each handwritten label marking modifications I'd made over the decades, upgrades that had turned this Victorian mansion into something far more sophisticated than its period exterior suggested. "Need something that scares but doesn't harm," I muttered, adjusting the desk lamp over circuit diagrams I'd drawn myself in the 1980s. The challenge was elegant in its complexity. Legal challenges would take months Seth didn't have. Direct confrontation was futile against someone who held all the property rights. But electrical systems, that was my element, where 4 decades of professional experience gave me advantages my son couldn't calculate in his business school spreadsheets. I opened the filing cabinet where I'd kept maintenance records since 1982, pulling out folders that documented every electrical improvement. The house had evolved from knob and tube wiring to modern smart-ready infrastructure, each upgrade supervised by someone who understood both the historical architecture and cutting-edge electrical engineering. Options flooded my mind with systematic precision. Circuit manipulation could create controlled power surges, annoying but not dangerous. Water pressure irregularities through pump controls would disrupt daily routines. Lighting inconsistencies could generate psychological unease without violating electrical codes or safety regulations. Electricity is my element. Time to remember old skills. The garage workshop held decades of accumulated components from various projects. Boxes of relays, timers, sensors, and control modules I'd collected from job sites and electronic surplus stores. Most electrical engineers threw away leftover parts. I'd saved everything, organized by voltage ratings and application types. Modern smart home technology had made remote control systems incredibly sophisticated. Wi-Fi-enabled switches, motion sensors, programmable timers, all designed for legitimate home automation, but equally effective for creating random malfunctions that would seem coincidental while following precisely calculated patterns. I pulled out my engineering notebook, the same brand I'd used for 40 years, and began sketching control circuits. If Jennifer and Mark wanted a high-tech Victorian house, they'd get more technology than they'd bargained for. The beauty of the plan lay in its subtlety. Individual incidents would seem like old house quirks, but together they'd create an escalating pattern of inconvenience and fear. Circuit 3 controlled upstairs outlets where they'd plug bedside lamps. A 15-second delay relay could make lights flicker randomly at night. The basement sump pump could create mysterious water pressure drops during showers. The heating system's electronic controls were perfect for temperature fluctuations that would make the house alternately stuffy and frigid. My calculations filled 3 notebook pages with voltage requirements, timing sequences, and component specifications. The system needed to be sophisticated enough to seem paranormal while remaining explainable through legitimate electrical phenomena. Smart home apps would let me monitor and control everything remotely from whatever apartment Seth eventually found for me. Safety remained paramount. 45 years of professional ethics couldn't be abandoned for revenge. Circuit breakers would prevent fire hazards. Water controls had automatic shutoffs to avoid flooding. Every malfunction would create fear and frustration without causing actual harm to property or persons. By afternoon, I'd created a comprehensive shopping list. Wireless motion sensors, programmable smart switches, relay modules, smartphone-controlled outlets, and a central hub that would coordinate the entire system. The local electronics store would have everything, and the helpful young staff would assume I was simply upgrading an old house for modern convenience. Seth's BMW pulled into the driveway at precisely 5:47 p.m., his routine predictable as Swiss clockwork. I rolled up the blueprints and tucked my notebook into the workbench drawer, leaving no evidence of the day's planning. Tomorrow would bring implementation. By Friday evening, when Jennifer and Mark settled into their dream house, they'd discover that some dreams could transform into carefully orchestrated nightmares, controlled by an old man with 45 years of electrical engineering expertise and absolutely nothing left to lose. The countdown had indeed started, though Seth still had no idea what kind of timer was ticking. Thursday morning found me dressed in my old work clothes, khaki pants, and a button-down shirt that had survived countless electrical jobs, with my tool bag slung over my shoulder like I was heading to another service call. Seth barely glanced up from his coffee and real estate listings as I headed for the door. "Running errands today," I announced casually. "Good for you, Dad. Stay active." His attention remained fixed on luxury condo photographs, probably calculating mortgage payments on his sudden windfall. Electronics Emporium buzzed with the energy of serious shoppers examining the latest gadgetry. A young clerk with enthusiasm matching his company polo shirt approached as I studied the smart home display. "Can I help you find something specific?" "Setting up home automation for my elderly father," I replied, which was technically accurate. "He's moving into a Victorian house that needs modern convenience features." "That's so thoughtful. These wireless systems are perfect for older homes. No rewiring required." Within an hour, I'd purchased everything on my list. Motion sensors with adjustable sensitivity, smart switches that could be programmed for random activation, relay modules for controlling major appliances, and a central hub that would coordinate everything through smartphone apps. The clerk even threw in a wireless security camera for peace of mind. Back home, I spread the components across my workbench like surgical instruments. The installation required accessing every electrical panel in the house, crawling through basement joists and attic spaces I hadn't visited in years. My 68-year-old body protested the physical demands, but my mind remained sharp with technical precision. Circuit by circuit, I integrated the new devices into the house's existing electrical infrastructure. Motion sensors went behind outlet plates where they'd detect movement throughout the day. Smart switches replaced conventional ones in strategic locations. Kitchen lights, bathroom fans, bedroom outlets. Each installation required careful wire splicing and secure mounting to ensure professional-grade results. The basement electrical panel became my command center, with the central hub connected to the house's main distribution system. From this single point, I could monitor and control every device remotely. The smartphone app configuration took longer than the physical installation, programming random timing algorithms that would create unpredictable but coordinated malfunctions. By noon, I'd worked my way through the entire first floor. Kitchen outlets now responded to wireless commands. The garbage disposal could be activated remotely at any hour. Dining room lights were programmed for sporadic flickering patterns that would intensify over several days. The second floor required more athletic basement-to-attic navigation, but I'd maintained enough physical fitness to handle the crawling and climbing. Bedroom circuits received the most sophisticated programming. Motion sensors would detect when Jennifer and Mark were sleeping, then trigger subtle disturbances designed to create maximum psychological impact without obvious causes. Motion sensor active, relay responding, smartphone connection stable, I muttered, testing each component systematically. The bathroom installation proved most creative. Water pressure sensors connected to the main supply line would create mysterious pressure drops during showers. The exhaust fan could turn on randomly, creating unexplained sounds in the walls. The medicine cabinet mirror had a smart switch that would make the light flicker when someone looked into it. Late afternoon brought evidence cleanup, the most critical phase of any professional installation. Every wire splice was secured and insulated. Wall plates were perfectly aligned. Not a single tool mark remained visible on outlet covers or switch plates. To casual inspection, nothing appeared different from yesterday. The system integration required final programming through the smartphone app. I created user profiles for different times of day, escalating intensity levels, and emergency override commands. The algorithms would generate pseudo-random events that followed mathematical patterns too complex for victims to recognize consciously, but sophisticated enough to create cumulative psychological pressure. Testing confirmed full functionality. From my phone, I could activate any device individually or trigger coordinated sequences throughout the house. Motion sensors provided real-time occupancy data. The security camera offered live video feed from the living room where Jennifer and Mark would soon be unpacking boxes and arranging furniture. Seth returned from work at his usual time, finding me reading peacefully in Gail's chair with no indication of the day's technical activities. His excitement about tomorrow's transition was palpable. He'd already scheduled the moving truck supervision and key transfer ceremony. Jennifer called to confirm the 9 a.m. arrival time, he reported. They're incredibly excited about getting settled before the weekend. I nodded sympathetically, knowing that Jennifer and Mark's weekend plans were about to become far more interesting than they had anticipated. The smartphone in my pocket contained complete control over their immediate future, programmed to deliver carefully calibrated doses of fear and frustration that would make their dream house feel more like a technological nightmare. Tomorrow would reveal whether 45 years of electrical engineering expertise could compete with a son's betrayal, one strategically timed malfunction at a time. Friday morning's dawn felt different, charged with anticipation like the moment before flipping a circuit breaker on a complex installation. Seth had left early to supervise the transition, which meant positioning himself as the helpful seller, while Jennifer and Mark arrived with their moving trucks and dreams of domestic happiness. I sat in the kitchen with my final cup of coffee in this house, watching the smartphone screen display my masterpiece in all its technical glory. 48 wireless devices networked throughout 3 floors, each one responding to programmed algorithms that would transform a Victorian home into a living nightmare. The beauty lay in the subtlety of escalation. Day 1 would bring minor inconveniences, lights flickering during dinner, water pressure dropping mid-shower, mysterious sounds from the basement. Annoying but explainable as old house quirks that any 1920s building might exhibit. Day 2 would intensify the psychological pressure. Motion sensors would trigger events when they were most unsettling, bathroom lights turning on at 3 a.m., kitchen appliances activating randomly, temperature fluctuations that would make rooms uncomfortably hot or cold without apparent cause. Day 3 would deliver genuinely terrifying phenomena. Coordinated electrical disturbances throughout the house, water pumps creating banging sounds in the walls, smart switches creating elaborate lighting sequences that seemed deliberately menacing rather than randomly malfunctioning. Short circuit here, water cut off there, strange sounds at night, I murmured, scrolling through the programming interface that controlled Jennifer and Mark's immediate future. The system included safety limitations that my professional ethics demanded. Circuit breakers would prevent any fire hazards. Water controls had automatic shutoffs to avoid flooding. Nothing in the programming could cause physical harm. The goal was psychological harassment, not dangerous sabotage. Motion sensors throughout the house would detect their daily routines, then subvert them with precisely timed disruptions. When they sat down for breakfast, the kitchen lights would begin stuttering. When they tried to shower, water pressure would drop to a trickle. When they attempted to sleep, subtle sounds would emanate from walls and ceiling. The smartphone app provided real-time monitoring capabilities. I could watch live video feeds, listen to audio recordings, and receive notifications whenever the system triggered events. From whatever apartment Seth eventually found me, I'd have front-row seats to Jennifer and Mark's growing terror. Most satisfying was the system's apparent randomness, masking sophisticated psychological manipulation. Each day's events would seem unconnected. Electrical problems here, plumbing issues there, temperature irregularities everywhere. But together, they'd create an unmistakable pattern of escalating supernatural phenomena that would make the house feel cursed or haunted. The security camera was already transmitting images of the empty living room where Gail and I had spent thousands of evenings together. Soon that space would fill with strangers' furniture, their laughter and conversation, their growing confusion as my carefully programmed system began its work. Nothing dangerous, but enough to scare them away, I told myself, though part of me wondered if Jennifer and Mark would prove more resilient than Seth anticipated. The smartphone buzzed with a text from Seth. "Moving truck just arrived. Everything going smoothly. Thanks for being understanding about this transition." I typed back, "Glad everything's working out." Understanding, as if I'd simply accepted the destruction of everything meaningful in my life with graceful resignation. Seth would learn soon enough that understanding and acceptance were very different things, especially when filtered through 45 years of electrical engineering expertise and a burning desire for proportionate justice. My suitcase sat by the front door, packed with enough clothes for a week in whatever temporary housing Seth had arranged. But the real departure was already complete. My presence in this house had been replaced by an invisible network of sensors and controllers that would make Jennifer and Mark's lives increasingly unpleasant until they begged Seth to reverse the sale. The morning sun streamed through kitchen windows for the last time as Abner Hezekiah defeated father. When I walked out that door, I'd be something entirely different. A ghost in the machine, a phantom in the wires, an old man's revenge disguised as a smart home system. The countdown Seth had dismissed as harmless old man, theatrics was about to reveal its true meaning, one carefully programmed electrical malfunction at a time. Motion sensor B3 triggered at 3:47 a.m. Water pressure drop lasted 12 minutes. Kitchen lights flickered for 37 seconds during breakfast preparation. The smartphone app in my furnished apartment tracked every triggered event with the precision of a Swiss timepiece. each notification confirming that my carefully orchestrated plan was unfolding exactly as programmed. 7 days of data filled my monitoring spreadsheet, a methodical engineer's approach to measuring revenge effectiveness. Day 1 had produced minor electrical inconsistencies that Jennifer and Mark might have dismissed as old house quirks. By day 3, water pressure fluctuations were disrupting their morning routines. Day 5 brought unexplained sounds from the basement that had them calling utility companies. Today's afternoon walk through the old neighborhood revealed the beautiful chaos my system was creating. A New England electric truck sat in what used to be my driveway, its yellow warning lights reflecting off the BMW Seth had bought with my family's legacy. 2 technicians stood on the front porch, explaining to a frustrated young woman, Jennifer, why their sophisticated equipment couldn't identify any problems with the electrical service. "Everything tests normal," one technician was saying as I strolled past like any other curious neighbor. "Voltage is steady, ground connections are solid, circuit loads are well within specifications." Jennifer's voice carried the edge of someone whose patience had been professionally tested. "But the lights keep flickering. The water pressure drops randomly. Yesterday the garbage disposal turned on by itself at midnight." The technician shrugged with the practiced resignation of someone who'd encountered similar complaints throughout a 40-year career. "Old houses have personalities, ma'am. Victorian electrical can be temperamental even when everything's working perfectly." Mrs. Patterson intercepted me at the corner, her 75-year-old eyes bright with neighborhood gossips, accumulated over 6 decades of living 2 houses down from my family. "Have you heard about the strange things happening at the old Hezekiah house?" I arranged my features into appropriate concern while internally celebrating the effectiveness of my psychological warfare campaign. "Strange things? What kind of strange things?" "The new owners are having terrible luck. Electrical problems, plumbing issues, weird sounds at night. Yesterday I saw a plumber's truck there for 4 hours, but apparently they couldn't find anything wrong with the water system." "That's unfortunate," I replied, projecting exactly the right tone of sympathetic bewilderment. "Maybe the house just needs time to adjust to new occupants." Mrs. Patterson leaned closer with the conspiratorial air of someone about to share premium neighborhood intelligence. "Between you and me, I think that house misses your family. 43 years of Hezekiah's living there, maybe it doesn't want strangers." Perfect. My technical sabotage was achieving something more valuable than mere inconvenience. It was creating a supernatural narrative that would make rational troubleshooting nearly impossible. Back in my modest apartment, evening brought the satisfaction of reviewing audio recordings from the hidden microphones. Jennifer and Mark's voices carried increasing anxiety as they documented incidents for warranty claims and insurance reports. Their rational tech industry minds were struggling to reconcile sophisticated smart home malfunctions with complete system diagnostics showing normal operation. "This is driving me crazy," Jennifer's recorded voice complained to someone on the phone. "Every professional we call says nothing's wrong, but something definitely is wrong." Mark's response revealed the growing psychological pressure my system was designed to create. "Maybe we should consider that haunted house inspection company Sarah mentioned. I know it sounds ridiculous, but haunted house inspection." The suggestion filled me with professional pride. My electrical engineering had achieved effects so subtle yet pervasive that intelligent people were considering paranormal explanations for perfectly executed technical manipulation. The smartphone app allowed real-time system adjustments based on their behavioral patterns. Motion sensors revealed they were staying up later, sleeping more fitfully, arguing more frequently about unexplained phenomena. Weekend programming would intensify their experience. Coordinated electrical surges during dinner parties, water temperature fluctuations during showers, mysterious sounds during television viewing. Seth remained blissfully unaware of the approaching storm. His social media posts showed expensive restaurant dinners and luxury apartment tours. A man enjoying the fruits of filial betrayal without considering potential consequences. Soon, very soon, his phone would ring with panicked demands for explanations he couldn't provide and solutions he couldn't afford. Patience, Abner. Soon everything will begin unraveling exactly as planned. The engineering magazine was just reaching its fascinating article about smart grid innovations when my phone rang at precisely 7:43 p.m. on a Tuesday evening that would forever mark Seth's education in the true cost of betraying family. "Dad, what did you do?" They want their money back. Seth's voice carried the particular strain of the panic that comes from watching carefully constructed financial plans disintegrate in real time. I set down the magazine, noting that my son had finally reached the point where impossible explanations seemed more plausible than coincidental technical failures. Me? I did nothing. I just live in my rented apartment. This can't be coincidence. Strange things are happening there. His breathing was rapid, uncontrolled, the respiratory pattern of someone facing bankruptcy and potential fraud charges simultaneously. Through the phone, I could hear traffic noise, suggesting he was pacing outside his expensive new apartment, too agitated to remain indoors. Tell me what's happening, Seth. Maybe I can help you think through the problem. Electrical fires that put themselves out, water flowing upward through the kitchen faucet, footsteps walking through empty rooms that 3 different contractors have verified are structurally impossible. The beautiful precision of my system's escalation was exceeding even my engineering expectations. Phase 3 programming had activated Monday night, creating coordinated phenomena designed to seem supernatural while remaining technically explainable through sophisticated electrical manipulation. That does sound unusual, I agreed with perfect paternal concern. Have you contacted insurance companies, professional inspectors? They've hired paranormal investigators, structural engineers, electrical experts. Everybody finds inexplicable anomalies, but nobody can fix anything. Jennifer and Mark are threatening a lawsuit for fraud. They want the full $1.5 million returned by Friday, or they're pressing criminal charges. The timeline was accelerating faster than I'd anticipated, which meant Seth's financial situation was even more precarious than his panicked voice suggested. He'd already spent enough of the house sale proceeds that immediate repayment would require liquidating assets at catastrophic losses. Surely you can return their money if there are legitimate problems with the house. I bought the BMW. I paid deposits on 2 apartments. I cleared my divorce debt. The money's gone, Dad. I can't just hand them a check for $1.5 million. There it was, the confession I'd been waiting to hear. Seth had treated our family home like a personal ATM, spending money faster than responsibility would dictate, assuming his real estate transaction was permanently final. This can't be coincidence. Strange things are happening there. His voice was climbing toward genuine hysteria now, the controlled businessman facade cracking under pressure that would have challenged more experienced crisis managers. Maybe the house just doesn't want new owners. The suggestion hit Seth like electrical current. I could hear him stop pacing, his breathing momentarily suspended as my words registered with the force of possibility he couldn't rationally dismiss. You're being ridiculous. Houses don't want anything. This has to be some kind of... His voice trailed off because even his MBA-trained mind couldn't construct a logical explanation for coordinated technical failures that left no forensic evidence. I don't know what to tell you, son. You handled the sale. You chose the buyers. You managed the transition. If there are problems now, they're consequences of decisions you made without consulting me. The police are involved because Jennifer thinks I deliberately sold them a defective house. I could face fraud charges. I could lose everything. Everything. The word hung between us like a bridge Seth was finally beginning to cross toward understanding. He was discovering that losing everything felt very much like what I'd experienced when I returned from New Hampshire to find my life's foundation sold to strangers for his financial convenience. I'll fix this somehow, he said finally, his voice hollow, with the recognition that some problems couldn't be solved through business school strategies or technological expertise. I hope you can, Seth. For everyone's sake. The call ended with my son still trapped in his BMW finance nightmare, while I sat in my modest apartment with complete understanding of how this impossible situation would resolve itself. Some countdowns were visible on digital displays, others ticked away quietly in smartphone apps, measuring the precise intervals between cause and effect, between betrayal and justice, between a son's greed and a father's patient engineering of consequences he would never see coming. Boston courthouse security felt familiar after 45 years of visiting municipal buildings for electrical permits and safety inspections. I wore my best suit, the navy blue one Gail had helped me choose for Seth's college graduation, and carried a briefcase containing documents that would return my life to its proper foundation. Judge Morrison's courtroom buzzed with the controlled chaos of legal proceedings, that would soon restore order to a situation Seth's greed had rendered impossibly complex. Jennifer and Mark sat with their attorney, looking exhausted by weeks of living in a house that had systematically undermined their sanity through precisely calibrated technical harassment. Seth appeared smaller somehow, his expensive suit unable to disguise the defeat that comes from watching sophisticated plans collapse under the weight of consequences he'd never anticipated. His lawyer shuffled papers with the resigned efficiency of someone managing damage control rather than pursuing victory. After reviewing structural reports, electrical assessments, and multiple expert testimonies, this court finds sufficient evidence of undisclosed defects to void the original purchase agreement, Judge Morrison announced, with the firm authority that makes judicial decisions feel inevitable rather than negotiated. The legal language was beautiful in its precision. Contract cancellation due to material misrepresentation of property condition meant Seth would return the purchase money, while Jennifer and Mark abandoned their claim to a house that had proven incompatible with their desire for peaceful domestic life. Agreement declared void due to undisclosed defects. Seth's face registered the financial catastrophe this ruling represented. He'd spent money assuming the sale was permanent, and now faced the impossible task of repaying funds that had already been converted into cars, apartments, and debt reduction. Bankruptcy seemed inevitable unless alternative solutions emerged. However, Judge Morrison continued, consulting notes that suggested careful consideration of all parties' interests. Given the unique circumstances and the previous owner's emotional attachment to the family property, the court recommends Mr. Abner Hezekiah be given first opportunity to repurchase at current market value minus documented losses. The solution was elegant. I would reclaim my house for approximately what my savings and pension could support, while Seth avoided criminal prosecution by transferring ownership back to the family member who'd never wanted to lose it. Outside the courthouse, Seth and I stood in afternoon sunlight that felt different from any we'd shared in months. Now you know the real price of a family home. My son studied my face with the expression of someone encountering a puzzle whose solution was simultaneously obvious and impossible. How did you do this? Experience, son. Experience and love for this house. The admission wasn't complete. Seth would never learn about smartphone apps or motion sensors or the sophisticated technical system that had made Jennifer and Mark's lives systematically unbearable. Some knowledge was too dangerous to share, even with family members who demonstrated poor judgment about consequences. 2 hours later, I stood in the kitchen where this entire crisis had begun, keys returned to my pocket and ownership documents properly filed. The house felt different, quieter, as if it too was relieved that the correct occupant had finally returned home. Dismantling the revenge system required methodical attention to every hidden device. Motion sensors came out of wall outlets, smart switches returned to normal operation, and the central hub was carefully disconnected from the electrical panel. Each component was cataloged and stored in my workshop, souvenirs of a successful engineering project that had achieved objectives beyond anything I'd dared imagine. In Gail's garden, evening light illuminated roses she'd planted for our 20th anniversary, still blooming despite months of neglect by owners who'd never understood their significance. The smartphone that had controlled Jennifer and Mark's nightmare showed one final notification. System successfully deactivated. All devices offline. I deleted the app and sat in the chair where my wife used to read mystery novels, surrounded by the life we'd built together and defended through the application of 45 years of professional expertise guided by love that proved stronger than betrayal. Seth would rebuild his financial stability eventually. Jennifer and Mark would find another house more compatible with their technological expectations. And I would continue living where I belonged, in a home that had protected itself through an old man's patient understanding of electrical systems and the precise timing required for justice to feel like destiny. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching,